Well, here we are. Remember we said that we would do a Cabrini too?
Yes.
So I think we should.
We talked about doing a Cabrini too, and now we have the luxury of having the star, Cristiana Dell'Anna, with us. And this is exciting.
How are you?
Good.
You know, I thought you were going to have a very thick Italian accent when I met you the first time, and then that beautiful British accent came out.
Thank you very much. Everyone gets very thrown by my accent whenever they speak to me the first time. So they go like, oh, why don't you speak like this all the time? And no, that's...
You had to learn an Italian accent?
I had to learn an Italian accent.
Explain yourself.
So when I auditioned for the part, I was in Italy. But because I've never spoken with an Italian accent in my entire life, I wasn't familiar with it. I didn't know what they sounded like. So I auditioned and I asked specifically if I could, keep the accent I had, because I wasn't sure I was capable as any other at that point.
Which was the English accent?
It was the British accent.
The British accent.
My auditions are in British accent. I don't know if I tried.
You're talking about your auditions in the English language project.
Yes. Well, Cabrini
obviously,
specifically.
Okay, but when you're speaking, in the Italian movies you've been in, you've spoken in Italian.
In Italian.
And has there been any accent issues in Italian on the projects that you've done?
No, not really. Except maybe sometimes people mistakenly think that I have a southern Italian accent, whereas actually I can do several, and I don't. Yeah. Mine is very clean. But anyway, when I auditioned for Cabrini, I did it in a British accent, with my British accent. And then when I got the part, I asked for a coach because I needed to learn my own very Italian accent when speaking English. And sometimes Alejandro, the director, every now and again, because when I get into the role and you're in the moment, there's a connection with your own feelings, with your own guts. I would sometimes tend to go back to my British. So I would hear Alejandro go like, oh, I have no notes, but could you please do it less British now?
You had me fooled. And apparently everybody else, because you didn't even know she had to fake the accent.
No,
right?
I didn't.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you obviously you are Italian. Your name's Italian. You live in Tuscany, right?
I live in Tuscany.
What's the deal there? How'd you even get into acting? How'd you get to London or the UK?
My gosh.
Quick version. Elevator pitch.
Quick version is that I left home when I was very young. My dad wanted me to be a doctor. I did a year of medical school. It didn't work out because I always wanted to be an actress. And I didn't just want to be an actress. Initially, I wanted to train in what it seemed to me to be the best place to do it, which is London. And, as a European before Brexit, that was the wisest choice because I wouldn't need any visas. I wouldn't need any permits whatsoever. So I moved to London by myself.
At what
no
age?
Family, 20. I had already left home earlier, but I just had my little dream and 1,500 euros in my pocket, and that's it. Without my father's support, either moral nor financial, I went to London.
Were they pissed because you didn't finish medical school?
Because they didn't believe acting could be like a sustainable career. Well, I proved them wrong.
Yeah. My parents felt the same way about me. I was pre-med actually. And
really?
And everyone in my family are doctors. All my cousins are doctors. And so it was just a given that you became a doctor. And I was pre-med in college, and I knew that although I loved the idea of being a doctor, I liked helping people, physically helping people, I realized that the science was not my strong point, and I was much, much more likely to get involved in things that had to do with literature and writing and directing and producing and, hopefully in theater and in film. And so...
you started theater, right?
I started in theater and then I went to film, but it was a big thing because the main thing with my parents, and it may have been the same with yours, they were worried about whether I'd be able to earn a living. It was, and that's the most important thing for parents. They want to make sure their kids and actually earn a living. So they assumed if I was a doctor, I'd always be able to earn a living, no matter where I was, no matter what it was. So it wasn't so much for them, it wasn't about
for
the
security
altruistic notion of being a doctor. For me, it was only about that.
Or was it for them because they didn't want to deal with the phone calls? Hey, Pop, I know I'm 60, but could I borrow 50 grand? 'Cause
Yeah, that may have been part of it too. But the thing was, they never could believe that if I was in the entertainment industry, that I could make a living.
I think the three of us
Had to
share
prove it.
that. Yeah.
Did you have to prove it?
I didn't have I didn't have the expectations because I left pretty early. Our relationship was a bit rocky. I left home when I was about 16, but then the expectation of the family as a whole, my family it's very academic, and my sister has a degree in economics and is a vice president in private banking in Switzerland, and my cousin's a theoretical neuroscientist, and everybody's a lawyer, a doctor, a scientist, or some economics thing. And I didn't even finish high school. I dropped out. I had a GED. I did some 6 months of what's called post-secondary, where you do your last year of high school and first year of college together. It wasn't because I didn't have good grades. I got bored, ADD, didn't,
And is that okay here in the States?
to drop out or to do both.
Is it legal?
Yeah, well,
You drop out.
yeah, you can.
Sure.
You know, yeah.
After a certain, I think you have to take
5 years or
certain
something.
number of
Middle
years of
school.
then you can drop out. But
I think.
and I mean, if you're interested in getting a GED, which is it's kind of like getting your degree online. Basically you take
It's like you take the tests, even though you didn't finish
and
school.
you get a degree saying you passed, you completed high school.
Yeah. You know what high schoolers know based on your scores. But-
Theory, that's just a theory. And this in the year, it's compulsory. You have to.
yeah, you do.
Find it.
Yeah.
Through high school
You have to.
or whatever. Okay.
See, in Switzerland, they do 5 years mandatory, and then they actually separate the kids into 3 tiers. And you only go on to university if you're in the highest tier, because they kind of categorize. Some people find it discriminatory. I actually think it's good, because what it does is, if you're not an intellectual or academic type of person, you know that early enough to not force yourself to learn some kind of an arbitrary degree that you're never going to be that good at. So you go into, and this can only work in countries where craftsmanship still is alive, like Switzerland, but then you can make a good living as a brick mason or stonemason or
Watchmaker.
or a chocolatier or something. But so they divide up kids, and they basically say, okay, blue collar, white collar, somewhere in the middle, and so the first.
I don't know, because I know it in England. You have your O levels and A levels, and I guess there are certain people who just automatically are geared toward going into physical, but not necessarily physical, but certainly areas of work that are not intellectual.
More manual labor.
Manual labor based. Others stay on and go to university and get involved in philosophy, like I believe Cristiana did, and it to some extent.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd.
And theater. And you could have been a doctor too. I mean, you would have been a great doctor, actually.
So he went into theater starting out his entertainment career. Did you do the same, or where did you go after?
Yeah, well, my training was for stage.
Yeah.
Normally that's what you do when you go to drama school in London. They don't train you for TV or movies. The acting business, to become an actor, you have to be trained for the stage, and that's what I did.
What's the hardest part about being an actor?
Being constantly unemployed, because that's part of it. It's the rejections. And I have a collection, an almost complete collection of all the auditions and self-tapes that I did throughout my career that were rejected. And I have them. And one day I'll put them together, and it will be real for people to see how long you have to wait to push through, to just go and be patient.
That's a great idea, but it reminds me, keeping all of this stuff up reminds me of an Italian movie. It reminds me of Cinema Paradiso, when he clips all of the little pictures, and then he puts them all together in one reel. All the kisses.
This is a mountain of sorrow next to a stack of really awesome moments, right? So what do you think the ratio is for every how many auditions, how many roles do you get?
80-20.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
You have to deal with that, and you have to trust the fact that the right project will arrive, and you just have to see.
So what is the right project? You know, I think I talk about that a lot with people, but how, as from an actor's perspective, how do you know if a role fits you or not?
Well, sometimes you know that a role will fit you even though you don't get it. And that's true. I think I've been rejected for some roles that I'm sure I could have pulled off greatly. Not to be proud, but I know what I can do. But sometimes it's just a combination of things. You have to really connect with the story, feel that you're at the right moment in your preparation as a human being as well as a professional to tackle that that particular role. And I'll try to make a parallel with music. I remember when I was a little kid, I wanted to play the piano. I didn't start sooner than when I was 17. And I only did a year because then I moved away. It was a shame. I still have the debt with music. But my teacher, who's still a friend of mine, he told me that I shouldn't rush. I wanted to play the most difficult things right away. And he said, "You're not ready yet." And I thought I was ready for it. But he said, "You can't play," I'm just exaggerating, Rachmaninoff unless you've gone through, Bach and Beethoven and whatever. Not because you're not capable of doing it. You might be able to play the keys, but there is an experience or a life experience or whatever you want to call it, a maturity as a music player, as a music interpreter, that will get you there at some point. So it's a combination of these things and what the other people believe you can do. Unfortunately, that's what it is. So when you get a story and you get a script, the people producing it, directing it, making it real, making it and turning it into a movie have to believe that you can do it. And that.
I think what you're sharing is true for every role in this industry, or probably any industry. But I also remember coming here feeling like I was ready to direct the next War of the Worlds or Avatar or some huge epic. But, the reality of it is you're 20-something years old. You haven't done squat in your actual life. You think you have. But I had a similar, my first producer, friend / mentor here, I've known him now since I've been here, which is pushing almost 20 years soon. But I sat down with him. I had a script in my hand, and I said, this is going to be my Jaws, right? Like, this is my thing.
This is the thing.
Yeah. He read it, met with me, and said, with all due respect, maybe stick to editing for a while. And I didn't understand what he meant. I thought it was an offense, but he knew that I was a good editor. And he said, stick to editing for a while. And only later I understood that he meant, in the editing process, you'll learn a lot about story and assembling. And, after you edit a feature or two, maybe you can think about,
Sure.
Getting more involved and doing something more. But because he knew me, I don't read a ton of scripts, and I just thought I knew everything, but I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, right? Which I think is your music teacher also telling you that you do have a level of preparedness that you have to be at. I mean, you couldn't have made Cabrini. Oh, well, you made Elephant Man as your first film, but that's after years of work.
No, I had a lot. Well, I want to go back to what Cristiana was saying about what's the hardest aspect of being an actor. I mean, I started as an actor. I really wanted to be an actor when I was in college, and I did. I acted in everything. I was in a lot of plays, and I think that the rejection was probably too much for me, because I realized that as an actor, when you get rejected, they're not just rejecting you for a part. They're rejecting you physically, who you are. And that's a very hard thing to face. When you're a director and you fail or you don't do really well, the criticism is not so much as personal. I mean, I think, and critics do this all the time, where they say, well, she's too short, she's too tall, she's too fat. Things that you have no control over are the reasons why sometimes you're being excoriated by critics. Yeah. And it's crazy, and I couldn't bear the thought of being, you have to have a pretty strong self-image, I think, although I know a lot of actors are very insecure, and I'm
maybe that's why the best actors are Italian.
But no,
True.
In my knowledge of Cristiana, having worked with her this past year, several years now, she tends to have a very strong self-awareness, and she, she's not going to be talked out of something that she believes in. On the other hand, she's totally open to listening to suggestions if anybody has a better idea about something. But she wants to. I mean, I don't mean to speak for you. You can talk about that.
Was she a diva on set though? Was she a pain to deal with on set though? Was she wanted to
not at all.
albino minx?
Well, in this particular instance, it would be hard for me to know because I think with certain directors, perhaps she would be a pain, and perhaps it would be justified because I don't think she is not from my opinion. You're not a person who suffers fools very easily. You don't,
I don't.
And so that if somebody lets you do what you know how to do, you're going to be fine.
So
as long as the director is not trying to push her into an interpretation of the role that she doesn't believe in. If she doesn't believe in it, I don't see any way you could do it. I mean, that's kind of...
Yeah, you don't strike me as someone who just blindly follows without any rhyme or reason.
No, I would do that if I totally, entirely trust the person I'm working with.
Yeah.
And I just let them tell me what I should feel. But it's a trust thing it's happened with me lately, just with an Italian director who's a friend of mine. I just believe he's got such taste and such an understanding of the human nature that when I come up with an idea of it, and we've worked together on Gomorrah, now we've just wrapped a series together for Netflix, a comedy, so completely different, but that's to tell you how much I trust him. He would just, if I come up with an idea and he's got a better one, I immediately go with his because I know that it's going to work. And I just, he would just tell me a couple of things before going on set, and I would it would resonate within me right away, and I just do it, and it's exactly what he wants, and I'm happy with that.
So what do you have to say about what he said about the rejection and the thick skin? Are you feeling this, and like that you're being rejected as a whole person, really, your physical appearance and everything? Does that affect you in any way?
Totally, that's what you feel, and it might not be true in some cases because maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it's the question of timing, or if you work opposite another actor, and sometimes it's just a matter of colors, and your fellow actor has to be blonde and you have to be
you look too similar or something.
Or something like that, and it's nothing to do with you as a person, but it has to do with you as a person, because it's true, they reject you for things that you have no control on, and you feel it, and you
and it's also the choices that you've made, because acting is all choices, right? You kind of choose how you're going to deliver something, and then somebody doesn't like it, so you're like, oh, you don't like how I look, you don't like what I did. That's got to be tough.
Early on in my career, when I was an assistant director, I was working in Hollywood on a television series, and I would sit in because I was very close with the producer, and he would have me sit in the casting sessions. And they'd have casting sessions, and I also would sometimes wind up maybe bringing the actor into the session and maybe sitting in the session and then leaving with the actor to get the next person who was going to come in. So sometimes I would do that. And I remember multiple times where the producer, who basically in television was usually the writer, had a very specific image in mind of what they wanted. And it didn't matter how good the performance was. If you didn't fit the type that was in this particular producer's mind, you weren't going to get the job. So I remember escorting someone into one of these sessions, and a young woman, and she was fantastic. I mean, she was just, you could see she was a brilliant actress. And I also knew instantly that she wasn't going to get the job because I knew what they were looking for. And I, when I escorted her out, I could see she knew also that she didn't get the job, even though, they didn't tell her in the room. They don't usually tell you. They don't tell you you don't get it. They only tell you sometimes they will tell you, we want you. But very rarely will they tell you, you're not the right type, immediately in the room. But you get a sense of what the room is.
Oh, they might not even tell you.
No, they may never tell you.
Yeah.
They may never tell you. That's another thing that's unfortunate about this awful industry we happen to be in. But in any event, I remember speaking to this young woman, and I was trying to let her know how extraordinarily talented I believed she was. Now, I was nobody I was the lowest person on the totem pole. I was assistant director. I'm just telling her that. But I said, you were great. I said, and she happened to be 5'7" and had dark hair, and they were looking for a tiny blonde with a toy voice. That's what they wanted, and they had an image in their mind, this producer and whoever, the director, of what they were going for. And she could never be that image because she physically didn't meet the requirements that they had in their mind for that role.
Yeah.
It just happened.
Which in a way, you can't really blame them either. It's not necessarily because they're trying to. It's a visual medium too, right? And
no, I don't blame them. And in fact, I have found occasionally, and it is not often, but a wonderful actor can change the mind of the people who had something very specific in mind, and they say, "Wait a minute, this is even better than."
I'll give you an example of that. Yeah. I have a great example.
And they'll go
of that. Yeah, I was casting for a silly web series 15, 17 years ago, whatever. And one of the characters I had in mind was a valley girl, like a blonde Meg Ryan of the 80s, right? Sort of, or not, so, but even more stereotypical like that. I'm like, right? Like, because I wanted that sort of oblivious stupidity to just radiate out of her, right? Because that was the character.
The clueless people.
Yeah, the clueless people, but still endearing, still cute, still somebody you would want to spend time with, right? Not like, I don't want to see, So I had that strong image in my mind, but we decided to have open casting to, whoever comes, because who knows? I'm open-minded and I like seeing more ideas. And this a Japanese girl came in, and my first thought was, did you read the breakdown at all? Because
you don't fit the role.
Valley girl, like it's okay, maybe, and so, but she had the whole little the ponytails and the little skirt and everything, and came in kind of, and then when she started sort of acting, and she was all kind of jumpy and she's like, wow, this is like the Japanese version of what we are talking about here, like the Valley girl. That's and I would have never thought of that character as a Japanese girl like that looks like she's out of an anime or manga, right? But it was so good and different, and it fulfilled the characteristics of what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And of course, we hired her because whenever you can do something that's familiar but put a different spin on it, it makes it more interesting for the audience too, right? Yeah. So I think, do you ever try to look at a role and maybe read into what they're looking for as a character, and even though you're not who they are looking for, you still give it a shot, or you?
Yes, of course. I mean, why not? Trying doesn't cost anything. Yeah. But I also, it depends. Sometimes I get a feeling that I really have to nail the character as they want it. And some other times I feel it's best to do what I know how to do best. And they will change their mind, because what I can give to the character is so much more than what they've seen.
I think part of the problem now, since the pandemic, everything is going online and there's all self-tape submissions. The problem that I think we have there for actors really, but also for us, it's very easy for us to go through a million submissions. But if you delivered something, your interpretation, and I want to direct you and say, well, let me see this, I can't do that. Yeah. And so I'll just go to the next tape. And it really does cause some issues, don't you think?
Totally. And initially it was also very difficult because you had to have the right lighting, the right sound, the right blank wall at the, and as a background, and all these things you don't necessarily have them all the time. Right. I got audition tapes or requests for audition tapes when I was on my honeymoon in Peru, and then how do I even pull that off? It's impossible. So it becomes difficult for many reasons, not just because of that. And I know I'm much stronger in the room because I feel the energy, I feel the chemistry.
Well, I think that's a major point, because, I mean, years before the pandemic, during the pandemic, we all knew that the only way we could meet anybody was on Zoom, or on some kind of video. So especially people who were in Italy and we were in Los Angeles, I mean, we weren't going to fly them over here just to audition. And we weren't going there because we couldn't get in. So, so the only way we could see people was on video. And look, it was a necessary evil during that period. But I go way back before that, and I worked with a director many years ago, quite accomplished and a very good director, who never wanted to meet anybody. He only wanted to see tapes, and it drove me crazy. I was the producer, and I said, "No, you have to meet these people." And he resisted me all the time. He says, "No, I don't want to form a relationship with anybody. I just want to see. Let me look at the tapes, and I'll pick the ones then that I want to see." I mean, it was a technique for this particular male director.
Yeah.
I didn't like it because I found that, from my standpoint, you learn so much more when you can be in the room with someone and you can feel the energy that you do. It's very, very hard to get.
Is it like in military? Because there's a technique in military that you keep your distance from your.
No, I don't know what it was. I just think he wanted to run through hundreds of. He just wanted to say, okay, yeah, and he would look at a face and get a little bit of a sense of them, and then move on to the next one, and then make his choices. But it was. I didn't think it was the best way to do it. I mean, something actors didn't know because they were doing tapes for the casting director. Generally, it was a situation where the actor would come into the casting director's studio. Casting director would put them on videotape and doing a scene, and then the director would only see the videotapes and not meet the actors until he had to.
Like it or not, unfortunately, right now
I don't think it's the best way.
No, but actors are they're a little bit treated like a commodity at times. I mean, not a little bit really, because even with all the online casting platforms and the way things work on the producer end or the casting director's end, you just have this page full of thumbnails to go through, and you're not thinking, well, every one of these people put effort in, submitted something, and a lot of them also don't, right? But you get 800 submissions for one small part, and you just kind of automatically trash 80% of them, and that's
look, I can see both. I can see both sides of this issue in a way that you may not, as an actress, because you're already at a stage where you could demand of two things.
Although it has some advantages too.
No. But you might also be in a situation where you don't want to audition because there's enough out there. Major actors don't audition. I mean, I'm sure, Jessica Chastain doesn't audition very much. No, I'm just mentioning. I love Jessica. That's mentioning a name, but I mean, she's done enough that if you want her, you can see the range that she has, and you're going to hire her.
Or start getting offers.
So you're not going to, I mean, if it was someone who is not known or someone who's, looking at a smaller role and they're trying, then they've got to put a lot of people. But I do understand I'm not suggesting that doing videotape or doing taped auditions isn't valuable. It is. I mean, because it allows you to see so many more opportunities, so that if you see somebody that you would never have imagined who can give you a little something. But I don't, from my standpoint, I always would like to take it to the step where you actually get to meet the individual before you make that final decision. It may not be everybody's favorite, but it is, I just always feel better, getting to know the person. Now, I didn't know Cristiana until I met her. She already had the role, but I was certainly very supportive of her getting it. And I met her for the first time in Buffalo. And it was, and we just became friendly. And I never questioned, because I knew she was good. She was right for it.
Good material.
Perfect for it. I never questioned her talent. I just wanted to get to know her, just to find out what she was like, whether she was going to be a pain in the ass, whether she was going to be, fun to be around, whether she was going to be a loner, whether she was a gregarious person. Did she like being around other people? Did she dislike the same people I did? That's simple.
Could you gang up with her?
And we found that we had very similar interests. We liked and disliked the same people.
What was your favorite part of Cabrini?
Well, so many things.
Well, not like the story, but like the experience of making it.
Well, I guess I don't know. Now it's been quite a long time, but I don't know if it was the fact that I felt very much at ease. I put so much work and preparation in that role since the moment I'd heard of the part, not even when I was offered it. I already started thinking about it. So for me, the audition process was already starting, starting the part and knowing what she was like and imagining that I would get it, and it was already mine. So because of all that preparation and the fact that eventually, I moved to Buffalo a month prior to the shoot, and I was alone, completely alone again, and I need that moment before starting shooting.
You asked for that, actually.
I asked for that. I wanted to be on my own, in my own world, reading the script back and forth, and retiring into my little world, which within me is very vast, actually. But I had to be alone. And then once I got on set, I just felt completely free. And sometimes with some projects, it doesn't happen. You're still searching for it. You're still, working on things that might not be clear right away. Maybe you didn't have the time to prepare. I don't know. Every project is different. But with this one, I knew exactly, not what I was doing, but I knew that I had it. And I could jazz it a little bit, and I could, try different things, but I felt completely free and in the moment. And I felt that way through the entire shoot. Never one day I felt like I wasn't ready or I was doubting moment. Never, ever. I felt so comfortable. And in fact, I was waiting for the most complicated scenes
Which was?
Well, it depends. The Fennett scene is a long one. We had to shoot it like a theatrical kind of setup because I had to go. Well, there aren't many cuts through the scene, so I have to go through the entire monologue over and over again. That was very theatrical.
Where you're talking about what's happening in New York when you,
or when at the hospital when she breaks down in tears. I've done that scene. And you only see seconds of it, but I've been crying the entire day. And it wasn't, I have this thing that I don't want fake tears. And
you got to do it right. How many takes did you do?
I don't remember, like 10 probably. And I cried the entire time because I was totally in tune with my feelings. That felt great.
Yeah.
Absolutely great.
That's a strong skill set.
But this just takes me back to a technical thing we were talking about earlier, when you said normally in a film, you know if you're in a close up or if you're in a wide shot, and and how much emotion to give. Yeah. I think you said something like that. And one of the unique and different things about this movie was there wasn't a lot of coverage, and coverage.
And for those who don't know, coverages, and you get a close-up, a wide, this side, that side, to make sure that you have the whole scene.
And strangely enough, it was funny because I worked with an editor once who became a director. And everyone said, oh, that's going to be great because editors are the ones who cut movies together. He's going to know exactly what he needs. And because he already has that vision, because he comes from an editorial background. And what I found out was, in this particular instance, what it meant was he covered the shot from every
options.
He shot close-ups. He shot medium close-ups. He shot it from upside down and around because he wanted to have every possible. So it was just the opposite of. I thought he'd know exactly, so he could limit the amount of shooting. He shot everything. It was the most amount of coverage I'd ever seen on a movie. Now, what was interesting about Cabrini in a I think in a filmic way, was the fact that it was shot generally more like theater than like most movies. We didn't shoot a master shot and then an over the shoulder and an over the shoulder when there were two characters and then a close-up and a close-up. I mean, sometimes we did because it made sense, but most of the time we were doing one pretty involved moving shot,
walking a lot,
which went, and the close-up was included in the shot. So I imagine, on the one hand, for an actress who has been trained in theater, and I felt that all of the actors who worked on this movie, oddly enough, were actors who had trained in theater. John Lithgow was a theater actor. David Morse has been a theater actor. These guys know about certain things that we may have talked about in our last podcast about this, but the notion that if you're on stage, the blocking is very specific. And, the director may block you into a certain position, but you really have to be there. Because if you're not there, the lights are aimed at you.
Yeah,
and
you're going to
if
miss
you
your
step
mark.
around and you want to define it, no, I don't want to be here. I'm going to face the back wall. No one's going to see you.
Yeah.
So you have to make it, even though it's a very artificial situation, because you need to have the audience see you, but at the same time, you need to make it feel that is authentically where you would be saying those things.
Right.
So theater actors tend to know that. Movie actors don't always. And also we know in movies that we have what we call method actors or which is a very broad brush that actually covers a lot of different type of acting. But the notion is they don't, actors who don't want, they want to find the scene by themselves. I mean, the joke of it was, Marlon Brando saying, when he was in Apocalypse Now, he had asked Francis to shoot. He never wanted it to be seen. He didn't even want it. He never wanted to be seen. So Francis said, "Don't you have to be seen?" I mean, that's So he had to accommodate, the notion of that we had to do something that would physically show him. He said, "No, just show a suitcase. I'll talk, but that's not going to work."
Right.
So in this particular instance, having actors who were comfortable being told the scene is going to occur over here, so you got to make it work, but you have to make it work over here. It can't work over here because the lighting isn't over here. That kind of thing is an unusual task. It doesn't happen in every movie, and it was the case in this movie, and the actors went with it, and I don't think anybody suffered. In fact, in some ways, I think it enhanced the performance because you were able to perform very long takes instead of breaking things up into little pieces.
Oh, I love that actually. Oh my gosh, much more than breaking
because
up.
it gives you momentum and stuff, or
For some reasons it's required, and sometimes they want to have little breaks because you're not on stage, and when you're on stage from start to finish, you go through a journey, but that doesn't repeat itself ever. But when you repeat a chunk of it over and over again, sometimes you want to take a break and
you don't necessarily shoot in continuity, which means see the actual.
Well, that's another thing. But I mean, in the particular scene you were talking about with the in the Senate, that was shot in always. It was from beginning to end.
Whole scene one.
We didn't break it up into pieces. She had to do it again and again.
Yeah.
But it was almost entirely from one camera position that followed her, the whole way. But I mean, that takes a lot of work,
Was it hard for you transitioning from theater to film because you're sort of encouraged to project so the back row can hear you, and then suddenly you're on a 85 this close to your face?
No, I don't think there's any difference between acting on stage and acting on camera. It's just the technicalities that you get to know. It's just a different means, but the matrix of it all, where it all comes from, for me is the exact same thing. And on stage, yes, I project my voice more, and I know my blocking, and I will motivate it every night again and again, and it will be in my head the same reasoning, the same motivations, or different ones. It doesn't matter. But whereas in front of a camera, I have, I don't know, a different process, but it's pretty much for me, acting is the same thing. It's not, it's hard. I know that actors tend to differentiate the two things, but I don't.
So yeah.
I don't.
Now, I wanted to mention another scene that we did in Cabrini, which is the scene where you are yelling at the vice mayor, and you're down on the floor, and he is up, and he's on a balcony. Now, that was another scene where we shot it from the balcony looking down at Cristiana. There was no close-up. We never had, the only shot was was a very wide shot of her, and she is screaming at a man, at the camera, basically, but at the man who's by the camera. And, you know, there's no, I mean, I know instinctively many other directors and probably in other situations we would have covered that, and we didn't. We just shot
Because it's not hard to pop on a tighter
no,
lens.
it would have been very
Yeah.
easy to do that, but we didn't. We just shot because the notion was that because the scene was about the fighting power. She is a very small person fighting a very big.
Yeah, and then you have his
thing.
power position,
and that becomes, you know, seen in the way the scene was shot. I mean, the actor, and I'm not going to speak for Cristiana. She might have wanted to have the camera closer because of the, you know, she's afraid it wouldn't see what was on her face. But we got it. But the notion of her being small but big at the same time, which is really what happens in the scene, you know, adds to the value of the whole scene.
And that also seems like something that through theater you would be good at because you are on a stage.
And she projected it,
so that
right
is
through the walls. Yeah,
That's one of my favorite scenes.
I love that scene.
I couldn't wait for it, and I knew it was going to be from far away, and we wouldn't cut, you know, on close-ups or anything, and I was happy about it because I was like, okay, and I'm going to show you my training acting, my acting training, my stage acting training now, and you know, and because of those reasons, I wanted to look small and show how powerful she could be, not the actress, the character, how powerful she could be even from far away, as tiny as she looked on the movie. And that was take one.
Yeah.
So you went first take.
First take, I knew it was going to be the right one. When we did two more, I think it was 2 or 3.
We print the first take
Print take was
But I was ready. I was like, no, you know, I knew that was going to be one of those scenes that it's going to be good the fast take because it's emotional.
Yeah.
Well, I think another thing about that, I don't know how you feel about it, but when you do a scene like that where you're literally shouting at the top of your lungs and emoting, it's hard to keep up that amount of energy take after take after take, and it usually, unless you were looking to see a weaker version of her, that's all you're going to get.
I don't know. Come to my house on a Monday morning while my wife's trying to get the kids to school, then you'll see how long screaming can go on for. No, but no, you're absolutely
no. But I mean, she was at a pitch, a fever pitch in the first take, and I mean, she certainly was capable of doing it again and again.
Yeah, but you put 100% into that.
But when you look at it when you're editing it and you're looking at it, you can see the slight difference.
Yeah, so if you would have taken the last take and put it in the movie, it would have been fine.
Yeah, it would have been
But
fine.
if you compare it to the first
take, you realize, wow, that's the one that blew you out of your seat, and that's the one you got to use.
And that's why I want to know which lenses they're using when we talked about lenses.
So how did you, let's talk about that again, because that was off camera. So you have the honestly quite rare ability, and I've worked with a fair amount of actors, and I don't know if you've seen the same, but a lot of them are not aware of camera framing, how close, what the lens means, how to move. They'll move in and out, even though the depth of field is like this.
Yeah.
And so you're from theater, it has nothing to do with camera. So how did you start learning that stuff to the point where you actually know, oh, that's a 50, I should be...
I don't know. I think it just happened, or maybe I have an inclination for it to understand it or feel it. But I never, it's funny, I forget about the camera, but at the same time, I know exactly where it is. And I would not favor it, but make sure that whatever is the purpose of the shot, I would meet it. And my performance will meet that purpose. For example, I want to know how close or how far we're shooting, because that will affect my performance. So if it's the same thing, it's the same scene, and we have to establish it from far away for the first time, fine. I'm not going to push it, because I know that in the editing, it's going to be used maybe 1 second at the top or at the very end.
So it's also a matter of like saving your energy for the right moment, and
Save it. You have to balance it. It's like a marathon. It's like, you have to work the entire day.
So here's a big question, because oftentimes when you shoot a little shorter film or something, there's 2 ways to do it. A lot of directors like starting in the wide, moving in. Others like starting on the close-ups, moving out. Do you have a preference? What comes first?
No, you have to adapt scene by scene. It changes every time. But I remember I knew I could do it. I knew I had it in me when I was shooting Gomorrah, because Gomorrah has been shot, not to change subject,
No.
It's all been shot handheld. The whole series.
Wow.
All seasons. Never the camera, maybe once or twice, sitting somewhere. It was all handheld. It meant that I had to be dancing with the cameraman the whole time. So to me, that was like, okay. And I reached a point when I wasn't even told where my mark was. And I always wanted to prove myself that I didn't need to have any marks, because I knew exactly how to hit it. And it became so natural. It was literally like a dance. And sometimes I would improvise with the cameraman.
And I know what you're talking about, because I shot for many years and I still like shooting. And my favorite thing to do is shoot handheld, because it does feel like you're a human part as mobile as the actor. And that's a beautiful thing, because if there's a good DP or cinematographer shooting or operator, and a good actor who's camera aware, you can come up with some cool shots and things that would never happen if you put that thing on any kind of a sticks or a dolly or even, jib or something, because of those little nuances that you can move and do something spontaneous. I can kind of follow you in. Did you get that experience a little bit?
Absolutely. Whether it was the DOP or the camera operator, it was that's what I found.
And, from my point of view, because I'm from outside of all of it as a producer, but I hire a lot of these people, and there is such a difference between, the very top Steadicam operators, for example, are ballet artists. They're artists, and not to say, they're also people who do that work, who just use it as a tool, and they're not really artists. They're just technicians.
But you can tell when you look at a shot.
And the best of them work all the time, and I know who they are, because I would try to get them. There's a guy in LA I always try to get if I can. There's a guy in New York who I used on Marshall, and he's extraordinary, and everybody knows him. Everybody knows.
They have
you
that
get
sense.
this guy, because he just feels he is an actor.
It becomes
in
part
and
of the scene.
himself,
Exactly.
that he knows how to make it work in a smooth and fluid way that is never obtrusive, but just somehow he has that, that touch, and actors love it, because they respond to it and are able to work with him, and it's a like pas de deux.
Like a dance, like you said.
Sometimes I would even anticipate if it's going well, if I'm doing it right, I will even anticipate that if I give a little turn, they will change the focus.
You can kind of feel each other.
Yeah, maybe they've focused on something else. I know it has to end there, but maybe I want to kind of drag it on me. And I just know that, if I give a little angle of my face and expression, maybe they might want to capture that.
Yeah, he'll like it. It'll look beautiful, and it'll
make
just
sense.
find it.
And I always have a great high respect for the story.
That's the artistry and part of filmmaking that you can't really talk about, you can't really prepare for. But when a good team comes together and you put the right people together, like we talked about, then that kind of stuff happens.
I wanted to ask you in Cabrini, just because it wouldn't be something I would know that much. What was your relation like with the cameraman? With Gorka?
Gorka?
Did you talk to him at all about framing or anything?
It was very much between Gorka, me, and Alejandro. And Alejandro would always dictate what it was, going to be like, and they discussed it. But I already had an idea of some of the scenes, because having been in Buffalo a month earlier, I had a chance to discuss the shots with Alejandro, so I kind of knew already what was going to happen, and I remembered it. Like every day I knew
Pretty much what the work was going to be.
what was going to be like.
That's great.
But there's been times when, you know, I had to tune in with Gorka if he was changing anything to kind of follow him. And I guess it's probably happened more often than the other way around, because it was so many things were staged in a way that I've improvised more emotionally than anything else in this particular film. So my and I call it jazzing, because I just think you have a track and it's something that you have to follow, and then you can just, you know, jazz it a bit, but stick it to what it's supposed to be. It was more of an internal improvisation and emotional rather than the stage. So how to stage the scene.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask you about, because it was very organic in a way. We shot the scenes in Italy at the very end. I mean, it was several months after we had shot the rest of the movie. We shot the work in Italy, and the stuff we shot in Italy was pretty interesting. I mean, it was the stuff in the yard at the beginning when they're in this convent, and we shot the chapel where she's sitting, getting ready to go and face the Senate. So it was that scene, which we had already shot the Senate scene. Senate was full of energy. We shot that in Buffalo. But the scene that led up to it required a lot of emotional and physical in a way, because we saw her at her weakest and at her strongest. At the end, I mean, it was at a moment of physical weakness, she had to become the strongest she'd ever been to convince these people of, and you see
that transition.
But you see you know, I mean, you looked tired and you looked weaker and you looked, I mean, it was
Did you do something for
miraculous,
that, or?
because I didn't.
Was.
No, but you probably were by that time.
It's drained of working with you. That's
Yeah.
why.
No, but I mean, you know, we have, and what we have in the chapel, which is a good example of kind of the way Gorka works too, is that there were no physical lighting instruments in the room. It was just the chapel and a big light coming from outside the window, so that that cast this
bit of
wonderful
haze in the
shaft.
room,
No, but a great shaft of light coming down just behind her. And it was, you know, quite beautiful. It gave her some shadow, but she is at that moment being egged on by Vittoria, who comes behind her and reminds her of something that she obviously knows, but she has to go from that moment to putting on her armor and facing going into the Colosseum, basically,
fight the dragon.
and fighting being a gladiator again, and that's what she does. And the scene in the not the court, but I mean in the Senate, is very much like the Colosseum, and she is very much like a gladiator who has to win, and they're ready to throw her out. So I mean, all of those kind of images, whether or not they were intentional beforehand, hard to say in most cases, but there's a lot of thought that goes into the juxtaposition of those series of images.
Definitely, yeah.
But at the same time, the actor is on a track where she has to know emotionally and physically, and physically is really the hard part for me, because I could see you, and you looked more tired. You had, I mean, things. I could see a vein popping in your forehead, and I couldn't. I said, "How is it? Why? I don't have to."
So how did you do that?
I mean, you
consciously
don't look the same. I mean, I can see the what you're going through before you say a single word. I mean, everything was right there in the physicality of the performance, and that to me was very interesting.
She just had some bad gas. So how did you do that?
No, I guess I just let my imagination trick me into it. I just, it's like playing cowboys and Indians, or I don't know if that's even allowed to say nowadays.
It's allowed here. Yeah.
But it's tricking myself into it. I love pretending. It's fun.
Again, I think of the other thing we did there. which was another beautiful setup where you're waiting at the door of the Senate for the senators to come out to confront them, and they're walking and they don't have time for you, and you look tired, and you are tired, and they walk and they walk and they walk, and then the senator says to you, please, stay in your own lane again. He says basically what was said at the very beginning, and you stand there, and they go off to this coach, and it's an amazingly beautiful, real shot. It looks, when I look at it, I say, that looks like CGI. It couldn't be real. And it was totally real. It was the series of arches in this building and a carriage, and the camera just, as the carriage starts to go, Cabrini walks into the frame, and she's alone in this, again, she's alone, but she's foreground now and not background. She's not, even though she's small in this larger frame, and she just looks so beaten and tired at that moment.
And that's
the next thing that happens after that was also shot in Italy. It's funny that we did shoot a couple of those things very much in and around the same time, because right after that, she goes back to the place where they're living, and the two, the nun and Vittoria, are wanting to feed her, and she comes in and she's exhausted, and she only wants to go to bed, and they look at each other like, uh-oh, something wrong. But again, we shot that whole series of things within one period of time, which was actually, and we couldn't have known that it would have been that way when we started, that we'd wind up shooting that emotional series of beats all in Italy, but we did, and everything that led up to the explosion that takes place in the Senate were all done in Italy, and I never even thought about it to this moment.
So do you, every time you have the script obviously memorized and the flow of things, does it sort of just naturally come to you knowing what the scene was before? Like Ivana has this, Chubbuck has this, like the moment before, so you're prepared and you think, where was my character? And then you go into the scene, or how do you?
For this particular one, and actually I was just thinking about it, because that played a huge role in how I felt at each moment of her journey. I had two scripts with me, one, and both of them were like full of notes and whatnot. But one of them was like this thick, and I brought it with me on set every single day. And the other one was on the wall of my apartment, and I had to have it right there together with other things that helped me get into the mood. And every day when I woke up, I would look at the script and see, okay, so today we're shooting this scene and this other scene, and I would locate it on the script, on the wall. If
you could see where, so it's almost like a timeline.
It was a timeline, not just as in chronological order of events, but also how emotionally she would change and what would happen. All the little tiny notes that I initially put there, and it was all divided in sections from 1 to 10, and how she grew. Do
you have like markers for emotion, like this color means this or that?
Yeah. And it's some of these things I've learned at drama school. Yeah. There was this one friend who was also a teacher that wanted us to write a diagram of the emotional journey, and being 0, where it's just normal, just like default, and how in every scene it goes up and down. So what's the character's emotional journey as a diagram? And I did that for Cabrini, and I had it on the wall.
Oh, nice.
So when we got to Italy and we got to shoot those scenes, I could picture it where I was, and I needed to be at -10 to reach then +10 at the Senate.
Yeah.
That was very clear in my head, because I had gone through it over and over again, and I knew it by heart. I still know it. Mm-hmm. I still know it.
There's a lot of languages in films that people don't understand. The beats, the rhythm of things, the character's arc, and the cinematography is a language too. Like what you were talking about, the shot. It's also, and I don't know, I mean, it was obviously probably a conscious decision, but at the point where that happens, you're invested, you want her to, you're kind of rooting for her, and then you're kind of standing with her watching that coach drive away, right? So it all works for the audience's perspective as well. Like it almost feels like they're going away from you.
Yes.
So all of this, when you, again, have a good team that think about these things and the actors think about these things, I think.
Well, I think it shows you the amount of work that goes into the planning of something.
Going
like
back to the beginning of the conversation, saying you needed to be ready for a role like this, you need to be ready for a film like this,
and
that's why
we all had to be.
the cinematographer had to be ready, the director had to be ready.
Exactly.
This is not.
And I think one of the things I said to you earlier on in the last podcast was the fact that in an odd way the fact that we were filming during the pandemic, or the pandemic had a great effect on the preparation for this movie in an unusual and in a way that made it an unintended positive consequence. I mean, not that I was looking for a pandemic, but the fact is, it was only the pandemic that would have allowed us to bring Cristiana a month early, because we couldn't quite send her back. To have her come over and then go back to Italy would have meant we'd have to go through the whole process physically and taking tests and everything. Once she was there, she had to stay there. Same thing with the cameraman. He came over much earlier than he normally would have, so that we could plan, so that he could be there for the scouting. And normally you would have him come for the scout, go home, and then bring him back 2 weeks before. Well, he couldn't go home, so he wound up being able to go to every location with the director, and they could spend a whole day at each location and plan out what the shots were, then come back to talk to Cristiana and say, this is the way we're shooting this scene. And I'm sure I don't know what, I'm assuming they did tell you that.
Oh, yeah, totally. And in that month, I had decided that I wanted to go a little bit under my weight, so that when it came to one particular scene, which is with the doctor, and you hardly see anything, you just see a little bit of my neck and, and probably a little bit of my clavicle or whatever, just a tiny little bit, but it looks ill.
You do.
It looks like someone who's ill, and I just wanted to go like 1 or 2, and I love.
So what did you just stop eating for a couple of days, or?
Well, no, I just had I drank for a month, and then I had to maintain it for the rest of the shoot. I was drinking vegetable juices and then have one meal, so it was it was a bit difficult for me because I love food.
Well, I mean, you live in Tuscany, so of course.
But it was good discipline to have.
Right.
And I just did it for those particular moments when I knew she had to look ill or tired. It was another element that I could add to the performance to help me achieve, or help the,
The part where he says maybe 5, and you say, well, we got a lot of work to do, or is that the same? Yeah.
That's
let me tell you, I mean, it's interesting also, I think, for an audience to understand that I mean, we all have a general overview of what the whole process is, but we have to take into account that every individual is responsible for a whole lot of things that nobody else is responsible for. So what you're talking about is, I didn't know what your process was going to be, but your process was absolutely right for that character in this movie. And, everything you say only makes it all the more clear why you were the right and only choice to play this role. No, I mean, because you really understood every aspect of the character. No one said, Cristiana, you have to just drink.
We want you to look a little sickly, so drink vegetable juice for a month.
Normally, you would say to the makeup artist, make her look a little sickly. But no, you actually took it and made it part of who the character was.
Do you define yourself as a method actor or something? Like, do you have any kind of description? No, right? It's just
it changes all the time. I don't even know what I have as a method or what is not a method for me. And so
but there is another thing too, I would say, that also has to do with the interaction of the crew and all the people around with the actor. Cristiana's on the set almost every day of this movie. There's not a day that she isn't working that I can think of. And she's dealing with a whole lot of people every day. Every different department comes over, they're primping, they're doing what they have to do, they're making things. And because of the nature of the role, the fact that she's playing a nun, and she's wearing virtually the same outfit in every scene through the movie. I mean, there are minor variations, a veil, this and that, but basically she's wearing the same thing. When the crew arrived at the set, when she and the crew arrived at the set, whatever, she was there before the rest of the crew generally, because she had to be made up and things had to happen. so that by the time the crew gets there, she's already Cabrini. She's already in that outfit. That's all we saw her as during the whole period of that. And we all leave before she goes home. She's got to be taken down and become Christiana again. Yeah. But we don't see that.
But you saw me.
Did you keep the accent mostly between takes? No, you went back.
But mostly that I think of it, mostly we only saw you as that character through those 12 weeks or whatever it was that we worked. We very rarely, I don't think we ever saw you as Christiana, because when you were dressed and ready to go, everyone was gone and you were taken in a car to or you went to your house. That was the end of it. Yeah. So it has another unintended consequence of making everybody feel they're in the story, as opposed to, oh, hi, Christiana, how are you doing?
Well, I would assume
she's not. She's already. She's
there, and you shot in Buffalo, which looks very much like.
Well, every place that we were in.
So you kind of were immersed. It wasn't a stage or a back lot. It was very real.
Yeah, it was, and it felt so real.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, maybe there is one thing only that I have noticed I do for every project. And that's to take some time away from the project before it starts. So I would say, even when we shot Cabrini, and I was preparing for a month, even earlier than that, just before shooting, I closed all my books, all my researches, all my notes, everything, and just went around.
For how long?
Like about a week, maybe, a few days. Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I have a similar, when I did a lot of editing, because that's what I started as, I used to deliver the cut obsess over it because I'm like very ADD but focused, when you're doing something. So I'd spend all night and all day doing it, love it, ship it off. And then I'd get feedback and, I'd get butthurt because somebody had notes. But I started finishing, and wherever I could, sometimes you can't take time off to reassess, but I would, as much as I could, especially with my own projects, edit it, and then I'd like 2 weeks, but sometimes you can't give it 2 weeks, away from it, do something completely different, almost forget about it, and then come back and watch it again and finalize it. And you always notice things that you want to change, and then you fix it and send it off because you're just too deep in the woods, and you got to get yourself out a little bit, do other stuff, and then come back to it. And
it's very similar because what I do is I definitely go through a very cerebral analysis of it all, but then I have to let it settle in my emotions, and that happens only if I take a break from it and I walk. Normally I go in the woods, normally I go in nature.
You sort of let it integrate with you naturally.
So that I don't have to think about it.
It becomes part of your subconscious almost.
The second nature, it's all that. But yeah.
What's next for you?
I don't know if I can say.
Okay.
Actually.
Well, that's a good sign.
There's a couple of things cooking.
There are some things happening.
Yeah.
I should hope so.
Yeah.
You need to be out there.
I think she will. I definitely think she's going to be out there and doing great work and other projects with playing other characters that will blow your mind. So it's great. I'm thrilled to see what comes next for you. I really am, because it was so exciting to watch. Most actors that I know, and I know what they will deliver. You hire them for what you already know about them. In this particular instance, we didn't really know, and we, it's great when you come across, a diamond, and you didn't. It wasn't that you didn't expect a diamond. You expected a jewel, but you didn't know how amazing the jewel was going to be. And now you only want to see what's next, what's going to happen, what are the other roles that she chooses to play. I will go see them.
I think that's star quality. Not every actor.
I hope I get to make
quality. I agree. But that what actually, piggybacking off of that, when I think about, not my favorite scenes of the film in terms of just, wow, this is the best scene of the movie, but I think in terms of showcasing what you can bring, the fact that you held your own so well against Lithgow and David Morse, especially when the scenes got really, like, when Morse wanted you to go back and you weren't having it, or where, you go into the mayor's room and you essentially blackmail him into,
Italians tend to do
Right,
that.
and I think that's these are no slouches. These are good actors, like really good, right?
Oh, yeah,
and
they're great.
and the fact that they're also older men, which is already a bit of a, an offset in perceived power, right? But you just
And look, I mean, that's what the whole movie's about.
yeah, it is.
Well, true. So that, I mean, the actor, in this case, Cristiana, has to be the equal of
Yeah, it's got to be here.
of the
Not,
people that she's fighting. She has to be at least the equal of them, and ultimately she's able to, she's able to better them.
yeah,
You know,
there's a
and
lot of
that's
people
hard.
attempting that out there, and I say this to my wife a lot, and at the risk of sounding chauvinistic or whatever, but you can't just pretend to be a tough woman and expect everybody to believe that you're a tough woman.
Yeah.
A lot of actors don't really know how to actually carry themselves against a strong man, and Lithgow is a strong man.
Oh yeah, he is.
And it's something that I can't even put my finger on. But you know what I'm talking about when you see the fake powerful woman versus the one who's really delivering it. So
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just I've always fought my entire life to be equal. I had to start with my brothers. I wanted to be equal to them.
That helps.
The equal, so that helps a bit. But I think I was born like that because whenever like my friends, when I was a girl, they would go mad for, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio, for example, and they would just like, oh so in love with him, and like I was in love with him too, but my purpose, my goal wasn't to meet it. It was, one day I'm going to work with him.
yeah.
It was completely different.
So you knew you had to be powerful to push through all those barriers.
It wasn't, if I meet him, I'm going to ask him a photo.
Yeah.
No.
No, it's going to be on set.
Okay, so what's our next project?
and he's going to be my supporting actor. Yeah. Right.
I've always had that. I never felt for anything else.
That's amazing. All right.
Well, you see, I mean, in the movie, at the end of the scene with John Lithgow, or at least the moment of breakthrough, where he basically understands that he's facing somebody, and there's two things. There's the line where he says, I thought you were new at this. Basically he realizes this is not some neophyte. That
He's
playing
really
with.
talking to the actor.
He's talking. He says, "Wait a minute, this is," and then the next thing he does is something that you would only imagine he would do with another man when he offers her the drink.
Yeah.
And she says, "Yes, I'd love. Would you like a drink? Yeah, I would." It's there's no hesitation. Oh, maybe I'll have one. No. I'm gonna have the same thing you're having. I'll have what you're having.
Of course. It worked.
It's good.
It works.
Very, very strong.
Any last words?
I think we pretty much gotten it.
Yeah.
Good.
Well,
Some good coverage.
if my husband was here, he would probably come up with forza Napoli, which is
Yes. What?
the last word would be supporting our football. Well, you call it
Oh,
soccer.
so that's
Football team.
the soccer team.
Forza Napoli, yeah. The last word?
Or Napoli.
All right.
Yes.
You heard him. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having
And everybody should be lucky enough to see you in many more projects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bigger and bigger from here on out. And hopefully we'll see you again and work with you in the end.
Absolutely right.
All right. Great.
You shot a clear point of view with no ship. You had a helicopter, and you shot the point of view of the ship. Then you would have to do a second pass with the camera pointing down. You take the helicopter, you run it through a second time, and then you do it looking up, so that when you see it going through, you see the ground, reflecting off the base, and the sky reflecting off the top. That was 3 separate shots composited to make one ship that goes through, and no one had ever done that.
That's
before.
incredible.